Welcome to Regent Park TV, I'm Samuel. Town Hall raises red flag over Bill 60's impact on renters, sustainable transit, and city planning. Today we're bringing you a full virtual town hall hosted by MPP Jessica Bell, where residents came together to talk about how Bill 60 threatens our community, from renters' rights to local planning, sustainable transit, and even climate action. The town hall took place on Monday, November 17th via Zoom, and it focused on what this bill could mean for Toronto's neighborhoods. With so many of our neighbors renting, facing rising costs, and depending on stable transit and thoughtful planning, these proposed changes hit especially close to home here in Regent Park. Residents and advocates shared the concerns, discussed how Bill 60 could worsen displacement and make it harder to build fair and climate-resilient communities, and explored what we can all do to push back and protect affordable housing. Now, here's the full town hall.
This is a town hall on Bill 60, which is the provincial government's latest terrible omnibus bill that does a whole host of bad things that we're going to be talking about tonight. First off, I'm going to talk a little bit about Bill 60 and its passage through the legislature, so we all have an understanding of when it could become law. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about some changes to municipal planning rules and provincial planning rules. Then we're going to move to Jamie Graham, who's going to talk about how Bill 60 affects renters. Then we're going to move to Michael Longfield from Cycle Toronto, who's going to talk about this bill's impact on transportation and cycling. Then Yaroslava Montenegro from the Federation of Metro Tenants is going to talk about tenant resources. It's an omnibus bill, which means it has a whole lot of legislative changes in it, and it's being rammed through at an unprecedented speed. The government has never really given democracy the attention and respect that it's entitled to, and now they're taking its disrespect for democracy to a whole new level. What that means is that Bill 60 isn't even going to committee. Committees, this process that happens in the middle of the bill where we're allowed to introduce amendments to the bill and people come in and speak to MPPs about what they like about the bill, what concerns they have. And the whole process of committee is to improve the bill and make it work for everyone in Ontario. They're just getting rid of the public hearing process altogether. We expect that third reading for this bill, so that's the final reading of the bill, will be debated tomorrow, and the bill could pass as early as tomorrow or Wednesday, which is, I don't even know how to say this, it's just messed up. So yes, that's the process. Now I want to talk a little bit about what's actually in the bill. So I'm going to start off and then we're going to move to some of the other experts who are here. The big thing in Bill 60 that I'm just going to briefly talk about is changes to provincial planning rules and municipal planning rules. So planning's all about deciding what can be built and where. And the government has consistently made changes to planning rules to make it easier for developers to build what they want, where they want, when they want, and to make it harder for cities, residents, environmental groups, community groups to say, hey, we need a balance here. This Bill 60 takes the government's disrespect for planning processes to a whole new level. This is what they're looking at doing. They are looking at making it so that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing has the authority to make variances to minimum or maximum zoning requirements up to prescribed percentages. So what that essentially means is that they can meddle in specific planning developments. How high, how low, how big, how many units. We also know that they're looking at changing the municipal zoning order process again. Ministerial zoning order process again. These are those regulations that the government introduces to essentially say, hey, this plot of land over here, we get to decide what the provincial rules are that apply and what the municipal rules are that apply to this land. And so we can essentially build what we want, when we want, and how we want to build it. So the MZOs used to be regulations, which means that they'd have to be posted on a regulatory website so people could provide comment and know what was actually happening. Now they're just orders made by the minister, which means they don't have to be posted on the regulatory website anymore, and they can be made very quickly. It says in the law that they have to post them sometime, but they've given us no time frame. So the minister could post it in 6 months' time, a year's time. Not great. The other final municipal and planning rule that you should know about is the government is changing the power of what's called the provincial policy statement. So that's that big framework document that guides planning across the province. Not only what the province has to do, but all the municipalities have to abide by the provincial planning statement too. It sets rules on density, it outlines where development can happen, and where employment lands can happen, and so on. It's a very comprehensive document. What the government has decided to do is make it so that the provincial government no longer has to abide by the provincial policy statement. It can pass any law at once, and it just doesn't have to follow its own rules. It's quite honestly very messed up, and it makes me wonder what kind of land use planning is going to be happening in Ontario moving forward if they don't even have to respect their own guiding document. What I expect is going to happen is that the government is going to continue down its path of allowing low density single family homes to be built on farmland, and for very large condos with very small units in them to be built in areas like downtown Toronto. So very small or very expensive. Very bad for the environment, very bad for planning, very bad for transportation planning. That's essentially my summary. And now I'm going to pass it on to the next person to speak. It's going to be Jamie Graham from York Southwestern Tenant Union and Climate Justice Toronto, who's going to speak about the renters changes in Bill 60. Thanks for joining us, Jamie.
Thanks, Jessica, and thank you everyone for being here. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So we're all here tonight to talk about Bill 60, and I'm here specifically to talk about its impact on tenants and our right to organize. Bill 60 is both an awful bill and, like Jessica said, really long, right? These like mega bills are made like this on purpose to overwhelm and distract us and to make us feel powerless. So let me start with the most important takeaway for me, which is Bill 60 does not contain a single measure that helps tenants or makes housing more affordable, not a single one. What it does do is speed up evictions, undermine tenant organizing, and hand even more power to big corporate landlords. Everyone involved in writing this bill already owns big fancy houses. Many of them are landlords themselves. They don't have to worry about making rent. They'll never know the stress of overcrowded units, mold, pests, or being one paycheck away from homelessness. But for the rest of us, the fear and precarity that comes with this crisis is our reality. 80,000 people in Ontario are already experiencing homelessness. And if we stay on this path, we're on track to have 300,000 people living on the streets in the next decade. Meanwhile, Doug Ford and his real estate investor friends want to get those numbers even higher so they can get richer. To understand this bill, we need to understand the people who helped write it, the Federation of Rental Housing Providers of Ontario, or the FRPO. Their CEO, Tony Irwin, was literally standing behind Ontario's Minister of Housing at the press conference where Bill 60 was announced. The FRPO is the lobbying group that represents corporate landlords, the same corporations trying to buy up as much housing in our city as they can get their hands on. They call themselves rental housing providers, but that's really misleading. They don't actually build housing. All these corporations do is buy existing purpose-built rentals, buildings like mine, built in the 1960s, where tenants have lived for decades or sometimes generations. Then they force us out of our homes through eviction, through harassment, and through neglect. Once they've pushed the original tenants out, they slap a fresh coat of paint on the place, call it renovated, and jack up the rent by something like $1,000. Their business model is evicting people. That's how they make a profit. They provide housing the way Nestle provides water, buying up something necessary that already exists and selling it back to us at a premium. By doing this, they essentially destroy existing affordable housing. Research from University of Toronto and University of Waterloo shows that eviction rates triple when these corporations buy a building, and that they are the primary force driving people out of their homes across this province. But honestly, we don't need to cite studies to prove that. Tenants in Ontario and in Toronto know how predatory these corporations are. We've canvassed over 8,000 families in the past few weeks, and the story is the same everywhere. Corporate landlords don't care about tenants. They don't care about the poverty and debt they push people into, the mold making people sick, the pests, the leaks, the constant anxiety that comes with having no control over or security in your housing. Every building we've organized has had seniors on fixed pension incomes, and every time rent goes up, they get closer to not being able to afford their home. Meanwhile, the people that own these companies are happy to watch our homes and our lives fall apart and then kick us out to make more money. And Bill 60 is designed to make all of that easier for them. It includes measures like hiring sheriffs to kick people out of their homes, more sheriffs than are already on the books, making eviction notices more threatening, allowing eviction if someone is just 7 days behind on rent, 7 days, removing the requirement for landlords to compensate tenants when kicking them out, claiming that the landlord's family member is moving in. This is a legal loophole that's already widely abused, and they're just hoping to make it even worse. Another aspect of Bill 60 is creating a tenant blacklist that's going to be visible to all landlords, a document of everyone who has been evicted or been to the LTB, essentially condemning people to housing security once they're on it, and just generally speeding up the whole eviction process so tenants have less time to appeal, to repay arrears, or to organize against their own displacement. Now, the last part I think is key, because this bill isn't just about evictions. It's their panicked attempt to break the power of tenant organizing. To me, this bill shows that they are terrified of tenants organizing to take our city and our lives back from these corporate landlords. This isn't just speculation. We know that one of the lawyers representing Starlight, one of the largest corporate landlords in the country, and the one responsible for nearly 9% of total recent eviction filings, literally gave rent strike training to FRPO members. They know that organized tenants have used the LTB to fight back against their landlords. That's a landlord and tenant board, right? This is why Bill 60 prevents tenants from bringing forward any issues to the LTB unless they have first paid 50% of their rent arrears. It's also going to limit tenants' abilities to raise issues to the LTB on the day of their hearings. The government frames this change as limiting ambush complaints, but it's clear that both of these changes, as well as the new 1-week eviction deadline for unpaid rent, are really about trying to stop tenants from using rent strikes and LTB hearings to fight for justice. This bill is packaged in this messaging that blames unaffordability on tenants and this idea that landlords are just too scared of tenants to evict them, with the laws as is. But that isn't true, and it's frankly insulting to the families that we work with. The FRPO's CEO made the statement about how Bill 60 will bring much needed housing stock back on the market. The insinuation there is that just by living in our homes, by not allowing these companies to put us on the street and sell them to the highest bidder, we're hoarding them. The idea that we're the ones who are hoarding housing and not real estate investors, I think, is really absurd. And I also think it's important to note how all of this is taking place in a context where government after government has allowed our horizons for what is possible in housing to just get smaller and smaller. We used to build publicly owned, truly affordable housing and lots of it. We used to have real rent control, not just for buildings built before 2018, but for all of them. Tenants used to have more rights that were easier to enforce, and now these rights are really often only enforced by tenant unions themselves. There's no reason beyond corporate greed that we all need to live somewhere owned by a company that is hungry to impoverish or evict us. These are homes, not investments. And now Bill 60 is a serious challenge for our movement, but I think it demonstrates something really important. Sorry, my alarm's going off. Bill 60 is a serious challenge for our movement, but I think it demonstrates something really important, which is that when tenants organize, we scare the people in power. I've been involved in political organizing my whole life, and I can honestly say that the tenant movement is one of the most organized, militant, and effective movements I've ever seen. We are winning, and that's why they're trying to stop us. Look at 38 Kensington, where an entire building of tenants were locked out of their units by a company that wanted to kick them out with no notice. The company tried to hire people to come in, change the locks, throw people's stuff, and threaten them with a big scary dog. But the community rallied, called the landlord, stayed overnight to keep the tenants safe, and ultimately prevented those evictions. Or look at Thorncliffe Park and Lawrence Avenue, where tenants held out and won their collective cases at the LTB over disrepair and above guideline rent increases. At 1440 Lawrence, the building was left in a horrible state by management, but they were eventually forced to fix it through resistance by tenants. These are cases where the city should have stepped in to protect us, but they didn't, so we protected each other. This is a story that's played out at Thorncliffe Park, at King Street, and other buildings around the city. The landlords that own these buildings know they've left them in bad repair for so long that the next rent strike is inevitable. Even last month, The show of force by tenants across the province was so powerful that the government repealed the section of Bill 60 that would have eliminated security of tenure just 3 days after the bill was announced. The wealthy and powerful see our movement as a threat, and they're right to. Our movement brings together people from every walk of life, people from conservative ridings, people who never saw themselves as organizers until the housing crisis turned their lives upside down. Half of this city rents. Half of this city lives in fear of eviction, of rent hikes, of having to choose between food and housing. We're sick of watching our friends and family suffer. We're sick of funneling every dollar we make into the pockets of real estate investors. We're sick of watching as people are left to die on the street under empty luxury condos that no one can afford. If this bill is meant to stop us, it has had the opposite effect. How nakedly destructive and corrupt Bill 60 is has brought even more people into this fight. So if that's you, we have a rally coming up on November 22nd, starting at 11 a.m. at 67 Yonge Street. That's the FRPO headquarters. So we're going to start there and march to Queen's Park. Please come, please canvass and flyer your building for the rally, mobilize your friends, talk to your neighbors. I know we're all, isolated, still coming out of the pandemic, but we really need each other now more than ever. And please go to tenantunion.ca/fightbill60. It's tenantunion.ca/fightbill60. I'll put it in the chat to get involved and connected to resources. We aren't powerless. We aren't alone. We are the majority, and together we have more power than we can imagine. Let's fight and let's win. Thank you.
Jamie, thanks so much for your very practical and inspiring presentation. It gives people hope. It's given me hope. Tenant organizing is extremely powerful right now, and many tenants are seeing this as an opportunity to not back down, but to get even stronger. I'd like to introduce Michael Longfield. Michael Longfield, speaking of success stories, is the Executive Director of Cycle Toronto. Michael, I'd love it if you could give us a summary of how Bill 60 affects cycling and transportation rules.
Sure, yeah. And thanks, Jessica. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Isn't Bill 60 about renters? Why is Cycle Toronto even here? So, just taking a step back, Cycle Toronto is a nonpartisan member-supported charity. We've been around since 2008, and I've been working with political champions across the political spectrum. One of them happens to be Jessica, who's here right now, of course. Even if there was nothing else in this legislation, from Cycle Toronto's perspective, making rental housing more insecure would directly impact people's choices to live in communities with more transportation options and sort of near new and existing cycling corridors. And so it'd be terrible just on that front. But buried deep in Bill 60 are additional provisions that would expand and escalate the attacks on evidence-based decision-making that we saw last year under Bill 212 and would really handcuff municipalities from making meaningful decisions about their roads. And this time expand to include things like bus priority lanes, street-side patios, possibly street festivals, and of course, the Premier's favorite bugaboo, bike lanes. So you might be asking yourself, didn't Cycle Toronto stop Bill 212 in court? And yes, Cycle Toronto, along with our two co-applicants, Narada and Eva, and our team of lawyers from EcoJustice and Pellier Rowland, did successfully win on a part of Bill 212, basically the part of Bill 212 that was going to rip out the bike lanes on Bloor, Yonge, and University. We're going to appeal on that, or the province is appealing that at the end of January, but currently the courts have ruled that that was unconstitutional. But the rest of the legislation still stands. And of course, what we're seeing now with Bill 60 is actually now the fourth time the province has tried amending the Highway Traffic Act in just over a year to try to work around these kind of legal challenges that kind of kept coming up. Initially, they said they were going to remove the bicycle lane. Then they tried rewriting the legislation to say they're going to restore a lane for motor vehicle traffic, and we have to remove the bike lane there. It was a bit of a shell game, but ultimately the courts did rule that that this was a violation of the charter. And essentially, what it came down to, and I'm not a legal expert, but what it came down to was that the province's claims around bike lanes, that they're a cause of traffic congestion, that they're responsible for Toronto being, one of the worst congested cities in the world, technically wasn't backed up by any evidence, and not even their own evidence. And so them doing something that was arbitrary and that their own experts also knew would cause people to be put at risk. That was deemed the charter risk, and that's where we won the case. I think an important piece there to keep in mind, though, is the courts didn't say that there was a charter right to bike lanes. So yes, the arbitrary and reckless removal of the bike lanes was a charter violation, but bike lanes themselves are not a charter right. And I think that's where they're coming in with Bill 60 again and really fine-tuning that argument, because if they can't remove bike lanes, why don't we just block municipalities from being able to build them? And that's basically what's in Bill 212 is, whereas before they were claiming there would be some process for approving new bike lanes, they've just rewritten the legislation again. And now they're just saying that bike lanes won't be allowed if they involve any reconfiguration of travel lanes. And they also included another fun little clause. I don't know how else to say it. It feels like a joke, that it wouldn't just be for bike lanes, but for any other prescribed purpose. And there's no other definition as to what that means. Folks from TTC Riders and Environmental Defense have both raised the alarms that could include bus priority lanes. And when the minister, hopefully this will play, when the minister was sort of asked about this directly, he gave a not very clear answer.
I don't know if the sound's working.
The sound's not working. All right.
I'm going to try again.
Then I'll just go ahead. I wonder how I get the sound to work. Anyways, I'll just keep going. Basically, he was asked, he's being asked about will this involve bus lanes? And he says, well, we're just focused on bicycle lanes right now. But again, if you go back to the legislation, he may say they're only focused on bicycle lanes right now, but they have this clause right here that it can be for any other prescribed purpose. And all it requires is the passing of regulation. It doesn't require, new legislation or new consultations or them skipping committee again. They can just issue a regulation to do this. And so, again, this time last year, the minister tried to present Bill 212 as a collaborative process. They'd be working with municipalities and it'd be evidence-based. And, he was really trying to downplay the alarm advocates were raising about Bill 212. But I think we've now seen a year later, that there is no partnership, there is no evidence, and their plan is that roads are for cars. And so, I think this is a really important part of the legislation. Again, I think it impacts folks not even just in Toronto, but really province-wide. Certainly, there were a lot of municipalities and advocates that maybe assumed that Bill 212 was just focused on Toronto. So, Hamilton, London, Ottawa, other cities that were building bike lanes, that they weren't impacted by Bill 212. But Bill 60 makes clear that this is now province-wide and can expand to anything the minister wants it to be. So that's what I have for this part. And looking forward to answering any questions if they come up later. Thanks.
For those of you listening, if you have a question for myself or any of the panelists, please post them in the chat. Once everyone's spoken, we will take the questions as they come in. A few came in when people RSVP'd. We'll start with them and then we'll move to the questions that have come in. Michael, thank you so much for that summary, and I really appreciate that you actually showed the legislation, the proposed legislation, so that people can digest how significant the legislation could be, but also how unclear some of it is right now. And that's very typical of this government. I appreciate that. Yaroslava. Yaroslava is the Executive Director of FMTA, the organization that is charged with helping tenants and organizing with tenants. Yaroslava, if there's many tenants on this call right now who are wondering, oh my gosh, what can I do if my landlord goes after me? Where do I turn? What resources are available to me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Help them out.
Yeah, this is going to be something that we are going to be facing head on as tenants. So a little bit about the FMTA, the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations, is an organization based here in Toronto. However, we do accept calls from across the province. So I want to talk a little bit about the resources that you can get through both FMTA as well as where we can refer you in case that you're finding yourself with an eviction order, as well as the issues that are coming in from Bill 60 from now on. One of the biggest challenges with this bill, and I think Jamie had really outlined this earlier, is the fact fact that there is going to be an influx of cases that we're going to be dealing with across the city and across the province. There are services that are available to folks in need of this help, but those services are also really strained as it is, and so just putting more pressure on the system to be able to deal with these ongoing issues is something that is like a detriment to us all. And those of us who are at the Federation of Tenants Associations, like, we are all tenants, and so we are tenant-led organization. We help be able to navigate folks in terms of systems navigation, in terms of where to be able to turn to. So the first thing that you can do is be able to go onto our website, which I'm going to post in the chat for everyone to be able to see, which you are free to be able to call. You're more than free to be able to talk to one of our hotline counselors. We have a tenant hotline and info hub where we answer tenants' questions, and is a free service for the tenants' right counseling services here in Toronto. And we give summary advice as to what to be able to do in a particular situation, but we can't give legal advice. And so note that this is not a distress or crisis line, but we can help answer some of the questions that you may have with regards to issues with your landlord. So that number is 416-921-9494, and we're happy to be able to take on that call. The other thing that we do as the FMTA is that, well, we're actually one of the oldest and largest tenant federations in Canada, and we're comprised of affiliated tenants associations and individual members across the city of Toronto. And so right now, not only can you also call our hotline to be able to figure out where to be able to be navigated to in case you have issues with your landlord, but as Jamie said, we have collective power in organizing, and that ultimately is going to be the main mechanism that tenants are going to have to use to be able to fight back against the policies of this provincial government that does not see us as citizens to be able to afford our rights. We are seen as second-class citizens. Tenants are seen that way in this country, unfortunately, and we have to be able to fight for a seat at the table to be able to have our rights be respected. So we have an outreach and organizing team, and if you're interested in being able to organize your own tenants association in your building, feel free to give us a call at our specific outreach and organizing team line, which the number I will also post in the chat later is 416-413-9442. And reaching out to us. We can help you with dealing with N12 and 13 evictions, and especially with above guideline increases specifically, how to be able to navigate that. If you also want to learn a bit more about your rights and be able to understand what the LTV is, and as well as the Residential Tenancies Act in a bit more detail, we have an ongoing tenant school program where we offer this to a variety of different tenants across the city. And we're actually going to be doing something that's really interesting, that we're bringing that tenant school to your specific neighborhood and trying to be able to reach folks within the specific neighborhood so that they can learn about tenant rights in a bigger way. So again, it's the same number, the 413 number that I posted earlier, but I'm also going to put that in the chat for folks to be able to share. Specifically, also, if you are currently facing an eviction notice, specifically, you still have rights under the RTA. And while Bill 60 does diminish these rights especially in terms of time frame, there are still mechanisms that you can use to be able to seek that help. One of the things is if you are below a certain threshold in terms of your income, you can reach out to your local legal clinic, which I've also put in the chat, to be able to find. If you can put in your data as to where to be able to find your local legal clinic, you can also go there. If you meet above a certain threshold in terms of income and you don't qualify for that legal aid help, then you can also go to CCHR, which I'm also going to put in the chat, which is the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights. They are our partners with the city in terms of dealing with tenant cases that don't meet the threshold of the legal clinics. And if you're facing an end form of any kind, I do suggest that you reach out to these folks, either to the legal clinics, which is CCHR, so that they can help you with the case. But again, if you are interested in organizing your own tenants association, you can feel free to give us a call, and we can be more than happy to be able to help you organize and connect you to things that are happening in the tenant movement. But also, just to say that we are working together with our partners with York Southwest Tenant Union, who's been doing amazing, phenomenal work. We are going to be joining them on the streets this Saturday to be able to protest this bill. We're going to be bringing our contingent along for that as well. And I believe on Wednesday night, we're going to be doing an organizing meeting on how best we can support that day of action. So if you want to be able to find more information about that, you can feel free to reach out to us. And our information has been put in the chat. So we are more united, and we are stronger together, and together we are going to win this fight. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Yaroslava. And I really appreciate it that you're all mentioning specific, tangible things that people can do to help themselves if they're facing an issue, and also what they can do to work with other tenants to fight back. We'll make sure to include those announcements, like the organizing meeting that's happening, as well as the rally that's happening on the 22nd. So those of you that are on this call know there's specific things you can do to stand up for renters. Now I'm going to get to the questions. A few have come in. So I'm just going to start with the ones that came in from the questions when people RSVP'd, and then we'll move to the questions that have been coming through on the chat. If you have additional questions or comments, please post them. I really appreciate it when people post comments as well. We all get to read them and it informs all of us. So thank you for that. All right, so let's just go straight to the questions. First one's a pretty one that I think a lot of people are thinking about right now, which is, what can we do to delay, improve, or get the Conservatives to withdraw Bill 60? Jamie, do you want to start with that one?
I can definitely try. So I think, like, as we've talked about a bit, they are forcing this bill through pretty aggressively. But you can call either your MPP or your landlord. Like, if your landlord is aligned with the FRPO, we've been encouraging people to bug their landlords about this as much as possible, to let them know that, like, you know, as tenants, we're aware of this collusion that's happening. And beyond that, I would really encourage you to, like, you know, come out, get involved, whether that's with York Southwestern or another tenant union. We have been coordinating folks to transit, like, together or carpool from downtown Toronto into Conservative ridings in the GTA to help out with the canvassing that's going on out there. So if that's something you want to help out with, it's been really cool and rewarding going out, talking to people. You know, I think it's like, knocking on doors is scary at first, but I think you'll find that most people are actually really relieved and excited to talk to somebody about stuff like this. They're scared, they're isolated, their landlord hasn't fixed the leak in their ceiling in 2 years, and you know, they're just happy to talk to someone. So I would say that, and definitely come out to the rally on the 22nd. We're going to make it really big. And you know, the government has walked back things where we did have a really big show of force in the past. In this case, I think it's all hands on deck, whatever we can do. I think a few of us have put some links in the chat as well. I would encourage folks to check out.
Thank you for that. I'm going to just move, so because this is a big question. Michael, do you have any additional comments?
No, I think one of the things that certainly Cycle Toronto has been working with advocacy groups outside of Toronto, at least on the, you know, the bike lane piece and the road restriction piece. We know the Premier doesn't care about Toronto. I think that's probably the most generous way you could put it. But he certainly doesn't care about us politically. His majority government isn't propped up by votes he needs in the city of Toronto. It's certainly the belt around the GTA, and it's very easy for him to, basically blame cyclists or marginalize or scapegoat folks to sort of imply that we're the problem or that people who ride bikes are the problem. Gig workers are picked on a lot as part of this. Everyone's very happy to have their food delivered to them hot and fresh, but will then at the same time get very upset that these gig workers maybe don't want to die doing their jobs. So one of the things we have been trying to do and been working with is with advocacy groups outside of Toronto to help raise the issue there, because we know it's not going to be Toronto. Most of the Toronto MPPs are already opposed to Bill 60 and already opposed to Bill 212. It's trying to build up that coalition, both short term and longer term, because I think this is both a short game and a long game. So that even if and when the vote does happen this week, we're still fighting back and preparing for as they're still in legislature and even for the next election.
100%. There's about 80 of them and there's about 14 million of us. I've been doing this job now for 7.5 years, and this government loves to essentially measure and cut at the same time when it comes to legislation, when we all know it's better to measure twice and cut once. And we also frequently see them roll back laws that they've passed, from changes to the development charges, to rules that affect municipalities, to the Greenbelt, to Bill 124, which suppressed public sector workers' wages to 1% a year for many years until they lost. So just because the bill will possibly pass this week, it doesn't mean that the fight is done. All right, next question is for me, and the question is, will the NDP ever support civil disobedience in the attempt to garner media attention for a particular issue? Yes. All right, next question. We understand that Bill 60 will provide a legal framework, but that the details will be in the regulations. Will we see, like previous bill, the threat of regulations hanging over our head without necessarily being actuated? Or does it seem like these regulations will be undemocratically rushed in the same way the bill is being rushed? So essentially questions about regulations. When are they going to make them? Does anyone have an opinion on this question?
I believe my understanding is that a lot of that this is going to affect the RTA pretty much immediately. That is my understanding. And so there are going to be specific there are specific pieces of legislation that are already that are named in the legislation that are going to be altered as of the passing of this bill, which is why tenant associations and organizations are really worried, because again, like I mentioned earlier, we are already having a huge influx of issues from tenants that we deal with on a daily basis, and this is going to increase that tenfold, and not just for tenant organizations but also for municipalities across the province. And in particular, we're dealing with the biggest city here in Toronto, and the city of Toronto is also going to feel the pinch, and everyone is worried in terms of what that's going to look like for tenants. So that at least is our impression. Now, if that may change in the coming days. We're not entirely sure, but at least that's every indication that they've seen, that they've shown thus far, that seems to be the case, that it might be implemented as of immediately. At least that's from what I understand.
So I can answer just this a little bit. So I just went and scanned the legislation in detail. It's a really complicated answer to this question. It really depends on, like Yaroslava said, on what piece of the bill or law you're talking about. Some will become law immediately when the bill passes final reading. Some schedules will say this will become law at a later date. And others are what's called enabling laws, which means it gives the minister the power to create regulations about a whole lot of things, and they don't have to go back to the legislature. So my suggestion is, if the person who wrote that question has a specific thing, like, hey, what about the bit about them creating a tenant blacklist? When is that going to become law? If you contact my office, we can ask a legislative researcher to go into the details and find out exactly what we know about the specific pieces, because it's all over the place, depending upon what the bill is. In the past, we've seen them pass a bill and sit on things for years. So, for instance, I don't know if a few of you remembered a few years ago, the government passed these rules because they had to make it so that a tenant had a right to an air conditioning unit. They haven't actually enacted the rule yet. So it's been 2 years. So that's like standard for them. You know, they get the press, but then they don't do anything about it. So just to summarize, if you've got a specific concern about a specific part of the bill, contact us and we can get a legislative researcher to find out the exact answer, because it's a big one. All right, so I'm going to move to the next question. Very good question, that one. Okay. Okay, this is about the anti-democratic nature of this bill and the individual rights. This is blatantly anti-democratic, yes. All consultations with the community have been waived, yes. What can we do at the local level to form a movement that demands change? So do any of the panelists have a response to this very good question? You don't have to answer. I'll just move to the next one. All right, I'm going to move to the next one. Okay, go, Michael.
Well, I mean, I think probably we're not saying anything because for a moment it seems obvious. But then taking that step back, it's important. I think the kind of organizing that you're seeing on this call, certainly, you know, under Jessica's leadership here, but also with the other groups that are here, like I would just say, get involved and be selfish about it. Like, don't commit yourself to something abstract that you're not sure you're gonna be able to help out on. Like, this is like very imminent and very real. And if you feel very motivated and very angry about something and you see a group that's working on it, put your hand up and do what you can to support. These things will change, not because of any one of us, but it's, as Jessica said, because of, you know, a majority of people pushing back against this. Even right now, like when the province does their polling on these things, the premier, I don't know if the premier specifically, but definitely the premier's office loves to poll things. You know, before they come up with all their crazy, wacky ideas, they'll run a whole bunch of polling on it. And, you know, they don't need, within their polling, they don't need 50% of Ontarians to approve of something. They just need the majority of the group that they've identified as their supporter base for them to go like, okay, we can go into the election and win on this. But at some point, as we organize and as those disparate groups are all being punched in the face by this, we can really form a movement to push back and stand up for ourselves and stand up for democracy.
Yeah, thank you for that. We are looking at hosting a some kind of, it'll likely be a town hall at the University of Toronto to draw attention to the government's absolutely abysmal attitude towards democratic norms. This is just the latest in a whole series of things they've done that just completely disrespect democratic processes, from, you know, taking away school board trustees' right to manage a school board. Most of these school board trustees are parents. To, you know, I don't know if we all can, you know, go back to that horrid time when they passed Bill 5 and cut the number of ridings in the city of Toronto by half in the middle of an election. So we are looking at doing a democracy town hall. We don't have a date yet, but when we do, we'll send it around. And the purpose of it is just to draw attention and to shine a light on how this government is just taking their attitude towards like consultation and transparency. It's gone too far. So I'll make sure to share that information. Michael, I also really like your point around looking for an organization that does work that you like and joining. I find that the most effective work is being done by groups. Organizing on your own is really hard and also impossible. So it's a really good idea to join a group you like, support them, volunteer, join the board, donate. It all helps. All right, let's move on. We've got a few questions. This one is around landlord and tenant board adjudicators. So they're the judges, the little judges that decide on the landlord versus tenant cases. And this question is, who appoints the LTB adjudicators? Are any of them actual renters? Yaroslava, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take a stab at it. I think from my understanding is that they they appoint people specifically, either through government recommendation or I also think that there is a specific way that the like folks that are on the bar. So, for example, lawyers who like are practice in that specific area of housing law can also be can also apply to be part of the adjudicators of the LTB. Beyond that, I'm not entirely sure, but these kinds of like, because it's very kind of inside baseball kind of mechanism through which the LTB processes and are made, especially because there's been increased government oversight over the last few years. That's something that, isn't necessarily reflective of tenants. That's actually one of the things that I really appreciate from York Southwest Tenant Union is that Kiara, who leads the tenants the tenant union, often says it's landlord and tenant board, and landlord is first for a reason. So that is a kind of unfortunately the way that the LTB practices, unfortunately. But it also is backed up by the fact that the Residential Tenancies Act is not necessarily tenant friendly anyway, and the fact that Bill 60 even skews it even more now to the point where folks are definitely going to be in danger of eviction much more easily than they would have otherwise been, really, shows the way in which this government is like, framing tenants in that way. So, yeah.
I'll just add a few things. So the Conservative government does appoint adjudicators to the Landlord and Tenant Board. When the government came in, they fired a lot of the existing adjudicators who were, more politically aligned with another government, and then they've brought in their own guys. Many of them, overwhelmingly, are landlords or lawyers that represent landlords. Sometimes there's some weird stuff, like Paul Calandra's former constituency assistant who had a career as a hairdresser became a landlord and tenant board lawyer or adjudicator, which is weird. There is a committee at the Ontario government level. It's called the Standing Committee on Government Agencies. That's if an adjudicator is going to be appointed to be on the Landlord and Tenant Board, that committee will look at them, but they don't. Unfortunately, there's only a few people out of the many people that are appointed to all these tribunals that actually get questioned in committee. So it's only the most, egregious and concerning individuals that we'll be able to pull out and ask some tough questions. But essentially, who gets to be an adjudicator is decided by the Conservative government. So not great. Yes. All right. So let's move on to the next question. Okay. So this is a question about the rent control piece. Will rent control still be valid, or should I be expecting my landlord to increase my rent by up to $1,000 or more to match the new rates? So this is a question about the impact of Bill 60. Jamie, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, so as is in Ontario, we have a degree of rent control in buildings that are built before 2018, I believe. So that was around the time the Ford government passed this bill that new builds wouldn't have rent control. So buildings built after 2018, that is the status quo, right? If you move into one of these buildings, they can hike your rent by like $1,000 a month. That's been happening to people in some of the buildings we've been organizing in. You initially take it at what looks like a good deal, and then boom, it was built in 2019. Now your rent is totally unaffordable, which in and of itself is a huge issue, and also one of the things driving people to avoid new build housing. We're told, oh, we're building this new housing, it's going to be so great, it'll bring down housing prices, and then no one wants to move in because it's kind of a scam. So that is the state of affairs right now, and it hopefully will not remain that way. Hopefully we'll get actual rent control for everybody. But there was a part of Bill 60 that I think this question is referring to in the initial release of the bill that was looking to basically do that to everyone, even pre-2018 housing, and to get rid of security of tenure. And it's looking like the government did walk back that aspect of it, because that was the aspect that I think kind of went viral in discussions of the bill because it was just so blatantly like destructive to like everyone's quality of life. So they've said they are, I think, at this time, not looking to do that. I think they've kept kind of the door cracked open to doing it again down the line. And it was also a bit of a sneaky move to distract people. I think a lot of people we've talked to thought that the entire bill was walked back when it was really just that one aspect.
Thanks for that. You bring up some really important points. We have a lot of newcomers who move into our riding, and they move into buildings that were built after 2018. They're attracted to, little rental announcements like first 2 months rent free, or get free internet for a year. And then when they move in, some of them, they're new students to U of T or OCAD. They don't know their rights. And then they find shortly after, a year is up, that their rent is just skyrocketing. And it's very concerning. Okay, so I just want to summarize some comments that I heard. One person wrote, bike lanes make sense everywhere. Yes, and then another person identified something in Bill 60 that's not getting a lot of attention, which is that the government has put in some legislation in Bill 60, which means it kind of protects them from being sued by anyone. This is classic Conservative government. They do it in nearly every bill. Okay, so let's move to a bike lane question. This is for you, Michael. So this is a question. With regard to bike lanes, are they able to stop bike lanes going in even if there is no reduction in car lanes, but the road is being narrowed and the speed limit is being reduced? And the specific ones they're asking about are Kingston Road, and they're also worried about Rathern and Trethaway. Michael?
Yeah. So technically, no. And this is something the City of Toronto has been trying to work around right now is, a lot of, it's not just in Toronto, but across the province, there are a lot of very, especially in the suburbs, very wide arterial roads that are kind of overbuilt for cars that, city engineers can basically narrow those lanes to meet current standards, which helps slow down traffic. It's actually a really good way to slow down traffic that then gives you enough space to potentially build protected bikeways. The challenge has been that this limits the city's opportunities and really also limits the opportunities for connections. So in the case of Kingston Road, the entire corridor that was originally planned was going to go from Scarborough Golf Club in the east to Vic Park in the west and connect with the existing bike lanes, but they can't connect with the existing bike lanes now because they can't do that road reconfiguration on the existing Danforth stretch because that would involve the removal of a travel lane. So the city is trying to be creative in terms of how they're working around this, but it really is tying their hands in terms of the number of options and opportunities on this. And, I think, again, I'll just sort of highlight some of the other pieces of this too, at least based on our understanding. One of the ways, we were able to block the province in its attempt to remove the bike lanes was around this issue of safety, right? It wasn't just that we disagreed with the legislation. It wasn't just that it was irrational and stupid. It's that by doing this, it would put people's lives at risk. And with other types of provisions like road, like patios, like Cafe Tio, like the rptv bike lanes or bus lanes rather that are coming in for Pan Am, that same reason on stopping them from being removed doesn't exist. And so there are a lot of things that could be happening, in your part of the city or in a different city that are happening now, but if the minister passes a regulation, could remove them. And if they don't impact public safety, we wouldn't necessarily have the same legal recourse to stop them on that. They have gotten smarter on this, like through, it sounds terrible, but through the legal challenge, like they have been working a bit more to pre-vet these things from future challenges. We saw it with the speed camera thing too. Not only are they removing the speed cameras, but they immediately announced they were giving municipalities, all this money. It's actually not that much money, but all this money to do other road safety improvements. So that was how they were. That was one of the ways they were trying to skirt around a potential legal challenge there too.
Aren't they clever? Okay, so it's 8:40 and we have a few more questions, so I think we're going to be right on time. So this is a question where someone, an individual has said, can you talk a little bit more about how this Bill 60, can bypass the democratic process? Is it done legally? Is some loophole being used inappropriately? Is there a way to directly challenge the mechanics of how this bill is introduced? Again, apologies for my ignorance. Okay, so straight up, there's no bad question here. So I'm really pleased that you asked this question, because if you're asking it, probably a lot of people are thinking it. It's probably best for me to answer this one. The government is not breaking the law by bypassing the process of taking this bill to committee and having people give their opinion through, the giving written submissions and public submissions. They are legally allowed to do it. It's certainly challenging democratic convention. We typically send, under the Roberts Rules, Westminster system, bills are meant to go to committee. It's very unusual for them not to go to committee. Is there a way to directly challenge the mechanics of how this bill is introduced? For me, I think the best way, I think it's going to be difficult to challenge the passage of Bill 60 through the legal process. I think it's going to have to be done through organising on the abuse of democratic processes, which is why we want to hold the town hall. Okay, so next question. I wish that I was wrong, but I've seen this before. Okay, the next question is about housing scarcity. Okay, so I'm going to read out the question. I've heard that housing scarcity has been exacerbated by developers controlling the release of new housing in order to get the highest price, and that there is a lot of housing that could be available but has been held back to push up prices. This isn't about renting, but it must be impacting renters indirectly. Is anything being done to fight this practice, and does Bill 60 do anything to strengthen the right for developers to do this? Jamie, Yaroslava?
I guess I can take a stab at it first. I think it would be great to see what Jamie has to say about this. I think one of the things that at least the Federation of Metro Tenants, our position in terms of the idea of supply size onward, and we've also seen this ongoing defunding of affordable public housing for the last also few decades as well. So these are things that, for when we talk about the supply side, what we do with it, right? So the issue is about rent control, and as Jamie had mentioned earlier today, about the idea that rent control only goes up to 2018 and new builds don't have any rent control. That is a big issue in terms of affordability and being able to have that existing housing supply be regulated in a way that is affordable for all people to be able to access. That's number one. Vacancy control is also something that needs to be implemented as well, in terms of the fact that, if you are pushed out, right now there's a financial incentive for landlords to be able to push you out of your unit, either through AGIs or through maybe other shadier ways of illegal evictions. So that way, if they push you out, then they can jack up the price of your existing unit, and so that way be able to increase the rent therein. And so if you are living in a building that's built before 2018, and so the question isn't, for us at least at the FMTA, isn't really about the housing supply as much as it is about the regulations that are around the housing market and the policies that our government pushes forward that allows for housing to be more affordable for everyone. And so that's one of the things that we at least are pushing for: public social housing that can fit the needs of all people across, the city or the province as well.
Jamie, final thoughts?
Full agreement with everything that you've said. I think the issue is honestly about who the successive governments in power have put their trust in to build housing. We talk about it as this supply issue that we just need to, give developers everything they want and let them, take over public lands and parts of the city that, have cultural value, and just build these luxury condos. And if they build enough of them, eventually the affordability crisis will sort itself out. But we're putting that trust in the hands of these corporations that ultimately have a fiduciary obligation to make as much money for their shareholders as possible. So there's no point where it's going to suddenly become affordable. It's just not going to happen. And it's I'm sure absolutely true that they use tactics like this, the one described in the question, and others, right, to just make everything as expensive as possible, because that's what these companies do. So just full agreement. I think the solution here is public housing in our hands. It's, a home and not an investment. That's the solution.
Couldn't agree more. I want to thank Jamie, Michael, and Yaroslava for sharing your expertise. Also, thank you for your organizing. It's so important right now. For those of you that have been on this call, I really appreciate your questions and comments. We will be sending around a summary of the notes as well as the key action items that we can all do to challenge this government and all the messed up stuff they're doing, from contacting your MPP. I'm always happy to hear from you. Joining a local group, starting a tenants association, joining the rally on the 22nd. What time is it, Jamie? What time's the rally on the Saturday?
So the rally, it's 11 a.m. at, I believe it's 62 Yonge Street.
62 Yonge Street, good. And we will send around notes just to verify that. As the representative, say it again.
It's 67 Yonge Street.
67 Yonge Street. Don't harass the wrong group. Okay, so 67 Yonge Street. Okay, that's fantastic. As your MPP, I'm going to be doing everything I can to stop Bill 60 and to organize with you all and these groups to ensure that housing is affordable, that renters are protected, that all of us can get from A to B on a bike or public transit quickly and safely, and that our cities are safe, friendly, and affordable places to live. That's my job. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight, and I will see you in the streets.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit us on all our social media platforms. Please visit our website for more information.